You eat breakfast in the morning, lunch in the afternoon, and dinner in the evening. You've done it your whole life. Everyone around you does it. It feels so natural that you've probably never stopped to question it. But 3 meals a day isn't natural at all. It's one of the most recent inventions in the entire history of your species, and the body running on that schedule was built for something completely different. Your ancestors didn't eat on a clock. They ate when food existed. And for most of human history, that was not 3 times a day. To understand what your body was actually designed for, you have to go back. Not a few decades, not a few centuries. You have to go back roughly 2 million years to the version of you that walked the African savanna without agriculture, without refrigerators, without grocery stores, and without any guarantee that today would include a meal at all. That version of you is still running inside your body right now, and it has very different expectations about food than your kitchen calendar does. For the vast majority of human existence, food was feast or famine. Your ancestors were hunter-gatherers. That means some days they caught something large, ate until they were full, and then rested. Other days, they found nothing. Sometimes several days in a row produced nothing at all. The body learned to handle both extremes, and it learned to do it without breaking down. Anthropologist David Pimentel studied the food patterns of surviving hunter-gatherer groups in the 20th century and found that their caloric intake varied wildly from day to day, week to week, in ways that would alarm any modern nutritionist. There was no consistent meal schedule. There was no breakfast. The concept simply didn't exist. Food was eaten when it was available, in whatever quantities were available, and then the body carried on without it until the next opportunity arrived. This is important because it tells you something your body already knows, but your calendar ignores. Your metabolism was not built for 3 steady inputs per day. It was built for variability. It was built to store energy during abundance and burn it efficiently during scarcity. It was built, in other words, for a world where a meal was never guaranteed. So where did 3 meals come from? The answer isn't biology. It's economics, power, and the Industrial Revolution. In medieval Europe, most working people ate 2 meals a day. A late morning meal after the first stretch of work, and an evening meal after the day was done. Breakfast as a standalone morning ritual was considered, for much of European history, a mark of weakness or excess. The Roman writer Cicero actually recorded that eating in the early morning was associated with gluttony. Peasants, monks, and laborers in medieval England largely followed a 2-meal structure, and historians like Caroline Bynum, who studied medieval food customs in depth, have documented that the idea of eating immediately upon waking was considered medically and morally suspicious for centuries. That started to shift in the 16th and 17th centuries as urban working life changed. As more people moved into cities and took up regular paid labor, meal timing began to synchronize around working hours. Employers found it useful to align breaks. Noon became a recognized pause. Morning became a distinct category of time. And gradually, breakfast evolved from an occasional indulgence into a scheduled institution. But the meal that truly invented the modern 3-meal structure was breakfast in the industrial era. When factories demanded workers be on site at fixed times, those workers needed fuel before they arrived. Eating before work became a practical necessity. And once the morning meal was standardized, the rest of the day snapped into shape around it. 3 meals, spaced roughly 4 to 6 hours apart, became the industrial worker's rhythm, not because of biology, because of the factory whistle. In the late 19th century, something else happened that cemented this structure permanently. Food companies got involved. John Harvey Kellogg, the American physician and health reformer, was one of the key figures who transformed breakfast from a practical habit into a moral institution. His sanitarium in Battle Creek, Michigan, became famous for promoting grain-based morning foods as a health necessity. Kellogg and his brother Will Keith Kellogg eventually commercialized this into the breakfast cereal industry. Marketing followed, and with marketing came the relentless message that breakfast was the most important meal of the day, a phrase that was not a scientific conclusion but an advertising strategy, repeated so often that it became accepted wisdom. Here is the uncomfortable part. The science has never clearly supported 3 meals as the optimal eating pattern for your body. In fact, the research major review published in the New England Journal of Medicine, led by neuroscientist and researcher Mark Mattson of the National Institute on Aging, examined decades of evidence on intermittent fasting and meal frequency. What Mattson and his colleagues found was striking. The human body performs a significant biological shift when it goes without food for 12 to 16 hours. Cellular repair processes that are suppressed during digestion become active. Inflammation markers drop. Insulin sensitivity improves. The brain releases neurotrophic factors that support memory and cognitive function. In other words, the body doesn't panic when you skip a meal. It does something useful instead. This is not a coincidence. This is evolution. Your cells evolved to function well during the gaps between food. They had to. Because for 2 million years, gaps between food were normal. What wasn't normal, what your body has almost no evolutionary precedent for, is constant, uninterrupted caloric input spread across 12 or more waking hours. Your ancestors also ate different things at different times of the year. Summer might bring fruit, berries, and insects in abundance. Winter brought scarcity, fat storage, and lean protein when hunting was successful. There was no year-round consistency of food type, no steady macronutrient ratio. The body adapted to whatever was available and shifted its metabolic priorities accordingly. Modern nutrition science is only beginning to understand how much that seasonal variability mattered and how different constant year-round abundance is from the world your body was calibrated for. None of this means 3 meals a day is harmful. For many people, it works fine. But it does mean that the anxiety you might feel about missing a meal, that low-level panic when lunch is delayed or breakfast is skipped, is a modern social construct colliding with a body that was built to handle gaps without distress. Your hunger signals are real. Your body's ability to function through a gap is also real. And the idea that you must eat at fixed times to be healthy is not ancient wisdom. It is recent invention, dressed up as tradition. The version of you that wandered the savannah 2 million years ago went days between significant meals and climbed mountains, hunted animals, solved problems, and raised children in the process. That body is still your body. The brain that needed glucose to think clearly had a full suite of adaptations for extracting it from stored fat when food wasn't available. Ketone bodies, the fuel your liver produces from fat during food gaps, are not an emergency system. They are one of your oldest fuels. What has changed is not your physiology. What has changed is the story you've been told about what your body needs and when it needs it. 3 meals a day is the industrial scheduling tool that became a dietary religion, backed by companies that made money selling you 3 separate categories of branded food for 3 separate occasions. Breakfast food, lunch food, dinner food, each with its own market, its own shelf space, its own mythology. So tonight, when you sit down for dinner, or tomorrow morning when you pour cereal into a bowl, you're not following an ancient human rhythm. You're following a 19th century factory schedule that was commercialized into a 21st century habit. The body doing the eating was built for something older, something stranger, and something far more flexible than 3 square meals will ever be.